Welcome to Fight News Now Extra. I'm John Pollock, and we've got lots of news today to discuss with Bjorn Rebney and Robin Black joining me in a few minutes. We're going to chat about a major shakeup in Bellator. The Nevada State Athletic Commission addresses the cases involving Wanderlei Silva and Chael Sonnen, and the UFC has signed a middleweight bout with two top contenders. The news was made official by Spike TV after an initial report from Josh Gross that Bellator CEO and founder Bjorn Rebney, as well as company COO and president Tim Danaher, are out of the organization following a change in strategy from Viacom, who announced on Wednesday morning that Rebney will be leaving the promotion along with Danaher. No replacement has been named as of yet, but the name most rumored to be stepping in to replace Rebney is former Strikeforce CEO Scott Coker, who was part of the UFC after he sold his portion of Strikeforce over to Zuffa in 2011. He had a non-compete agreement which expired this past March, which would make him free to take a position with Bellator. Wanderlei Silva went in front of the Nevada State Athletic Commission on Tuesday with his lawyer Ross Goodman and admitted blame in avoiding a May 24th random drug test when an official with the commission showed up at his gym. His defense was that he was afraid they would find diuretics in his system along with other anti-inflammatories in his system that he needed for a wrist injury he suffered in February while filming Tough Brazil. The commission will rule on the punishment at a later date for Silva, who is not currently licensed in Nevada. The NSAC also issued a temporary suspension to the now retired Chael Sonnen, who also underwent a random drug test on May 24th, with the test revealing the anti-estrogen drugs clomiphene and anastrozole. Sonnen announced his retirement last week, one day after the test results were made public, and forced Sonnen off of the July 5th UFC 175 card. The Los Angeles Daily News has announced that Ronaldo Jacare Souza will meet Gegard Mousasi on August the 2nd at UFC 176 in LA. The two middleweight contenders met previously in the finals of the 2008 Dream Middleweight Grand Prix, where Mousasi stopped Souza with an upkick to win the Grand Prix. Souza last fought in February with a convincing victory over Francis Carmont, while Mousasi is coming off a dominant win over Mark Munoz last month in Germany. And I'm here with Bjorn Rebney and Robin Black. Not a slow day at all of news to talk about today. We have to start with the biggest story in mixed martial arts right now, the major shakeup within Bellator. Bjorn Rebney and Tim Danaher, two of the men that launched this entire thing, the two most influential people in the company, out. And now it appears that we are one announcement away from Scott Coker being back in the mixed martial arts game. Does this really completely change the face of Bellator?
Yes, it absolutely does. This is huge news for mixed martial arts. Kudos to Bjorn Rebney for getting Bellator started. And, you know, right now, Bellator recognizes the #2 mixed martial arts organization in the world, but he's taken it as far as he can take this promotion. Scott Coker is the man. He has a relationship with Viacom because the Strikeforce events were shown on Showtime, which is a Viacom product. Scott Coker has a great relationship with the guys from AKA. This is a guy that helped build Luke Rockhold and Kung Lee and Phil Baroni and Cain Velasquez and Daniel Cormier. So he knows the fight game. This guy has been promoting kickboxing matches since the 1980s. He understands the fight game, and if anybody can make a serious run for #2 and have the UFC shaking in their boots, it's Scott Coker.
Yeah, you get no argument from me about Scott Coker. Scott Coker is absolutely the real thing. One discrepancy I have is that I disagree that Bjorn could not have taken it further. I just think this went against some of his fundamental beliefs. Viacom's vision was based on spectacle, on getting bigger, and on conquering, and whatever they had to do to get there was totally on the books. Bjorn's vision was based on sport. It was based on winning. It was based on you have to win the tournament to get into this thing. All of a sudden, he was forced to contradict all of these beliefs that he had. He's looking at the camera going, well, yeah, you don't have to win the tournament anymore, but, you know, this is good for Bellator. And nobody was buying it. The Viacom changed the rules on what they wanted to accomplish, and because of that, it's not right for Bjorn Rebney anymore. But Scott Coker will do a fantastic job.
And that might have been the biggest downfall of Bjorn Rebney's vision, is the fact that you can talk about this tournament format all day, and yes, to a certain dedicated audience, Eddie Alvarez, Michael Chandler, I'll watch that every weekend. These guys were not stars, and you can argue that Bellator never created one big star on their own. That pay-per-view was largely drawn on the backs of Quinton Jackson, King Mo, and to a lesser degree, Tito Ortiz. And I think Scott Coker, you look at Strikeforce of how they were able to try and get more stars across. And I think that Scott Coker had more of that fundamental understanding of creating stars as opposing to just putting a league or a sport together, that's it.
How many weeks till we see Kimbo Slice being announced?
Exactly. I wouldn't be surprised. And you have to imagine if we had a time machine and they're all with these talks about Gilbert Melendez going to Bellator, you'd have to expect that if Scott Coker was at the helm, that Gilbert would probably, I wouldn't be surprised if he was a Bellator fighter.
Is this the end of the tournaments?
I don't know if it's the end of the tournament because I like the format. You know, for a lot of fans that have tuned into Spike TV, they might not know who Brendan Ward is, for example, but you see him over the course of the tournament and say, okay, yeah, maybe he's not at the level of Alexander Shlemenko, but he is game, he's young, he's hungry. So I think it's very important to use the tournament format to build these guys. But as I said before, it's all about looking at the vision. And the vision is, yes, you use the tournament format to build your stars, but just because you don't win a tournament doesn't mean that you haven't earned the right to fight for a title. For example, Quinton Jackson earned the right. This guy was a star in Pride. He was a former UFC champion. So I think Quinton Jackson earned the right to fight for the Bellator title. They just have to kind of develop where they want to go.
I think that you will see the end of the tournament structure within 24 months for sure. I think if anything, you'll see the end of everything you recognize as Bellator. I think this is the end of the Bellator era and the beginning of Viacom MMA, their vision. I think there's no more tournaments. I would not even be surprised if you saw rebranding. Bellator, the name, the logo, it doesn't necessarily mean anything to them. They relaunched, they now own an organization, they've now developed it, having certain numbers on television, on a recognizable network, and they now relaunch as their new thing with Scott Coker running it. And if they do all of that and just say, we're the official competition of the UFC, we're going to have big stars and big shows and immense pay-per-views, and you can see us on Spike like you've watched TV, fighting on TV forever, and we're running it our way.
Quickly, lost in all this was a pretty big Nevada State Athletic Commission hearing on Tuesday where they gave a temporary suspension to Chael Sonnen and Vanderlei Silva stating, well, I wanted to take the random drug test, but I was afraid you would find a banned substance in there of diuretics for a wrist injury that I have had since February. I don't want to call the man anything, but that to me is a suspicious reasoning.
Yeah, well, listen, if somebody comes out, at least in Canada, I think it's the same in the States, if you're driving your car and they say, we think you've been drinking, we can smell it on your breath, they go to give you a breathalyzer and you say, I'm not taking it, you are now guilty of impaired driving. Refusing to take a breathalyzer means you're impaired because we can assume it. It's the same scenario.
I love Vanderlei Silva.
Me too.
And diuretics, I mean, not a performance enhancer, but also a masking agent. And that's the main reason it is banned by WADA.
Also, I love Vanderlei, and I hope he comes back, but, I mean, who's to say that was the only thing he was on?
It didn't take the test, so there's no way of proving what was in his system. We have more Fight News Now Extra, and it's coming up right now.